The young and the restless spoilers Kyle Abbott stood at the threshold of Nikki's grand drawing room, one hand tucked into the pocket of his suit trousers, the other brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead as he took a measured breath. The soft hum of conversation drifted through the double doors, punctuated by the discreet clink of crystal and the muted laughter of high society guests. Yet to Kyle's practiced eye, every polite nod, every half-smile concealed a flicker of something sharper: suspicion, judgment, the unspoken question of whether he, and by extension, Claire, belonged in this room at all. Tonight was not just Nikki's birthday celebration, it was the moment Kyle had been dreading and anticipating in equal measure. He was here to formally present himself before Victor Newman and to ask for something neither he nor Claire could take for granted: acceptance. A few steps behind him, Claire Newman hovered in the hallway, straightening the skirt of her cocktail dress with trembling fingers. The soft ivory gown contrasted with her dark hair but did little to mask the worry etched across her face. She knew her place in this storied dynasty was tenuous, built upon the goodwill of her father and grandfather rather than the blood shared by the Newmans. She glanced at Kyle, drawing courage from his determined expression. He turned and gave her a small, reassuring nod, an unspoken promise that they would face whatever came together. Inside, the air felt charged. Victor Newman sat near the head of a long mahogany table, flanked by Nikki on his left and Victoria on his right. The table's glossy surface reflected the array of hors d'oeuvres meant for the buffet later in the evening, but for now, the plates lay untouched, an unspoken testament to the family's tension. Victoria gave Claire a polite smile when she caught her gaze, but it was warm and tinged with sympathy. Nikki's expression, however, was more guarded, as though she wanted to say something, perhaps counsel Claire to turn back, yet didn't have the heart to voice it. Kyle took the lead, stepping forward so that his polished leather shoes clicked against the marble floor in a careful cadence. "Mr. Newman," he said, bowing his head slightly, "thank you for granting me a moment." The gravel in Victor's voice came sooner than Kyle expected. "Kyle, take a seat." With a curt gesture, Victor indicated a chair opposite his own. Kyle settled into it, glancing sideways to make sure Claire was comfortably seated at his elbow. She met his gaze, her eyes full of both hope and trepidation. Victor's gaze was razor-sharp. "You want to speak about your relationship with my granddaughter," he stated plainly, no trace of welcome in his tone. Nikki caught her husband's sleeve and leaned in, murmuring words Claire could not catch but that seemed designed to soften his edges. Victor's expression flickered, just for the briefest moment, before hardening again. "Kyle, I know you're a capable businessman. You've proven yourself in Jabot's boardrooms. But that doesn't change one fact: you and Claire are not Newmans by blood. And in this family, that matters more than you'll ever understand." Kyle's jaw tightened. He had expected this. He had anticipated, rehearsed even, 100 responses, but nothing could fully steel his nerves against the weight of Victor's disapproval. Summoning his most respectful tone, he said, "Mr. Newman, with all due respect, blood has never defined what I am capable of. I love Claire with every fiber of my being. I have watched her grow into a remarkable woman, intelligent, compassionate, fiercely loyal. I want to spend my life doing everything I can to make her happy." Victor's lips curled in a half-smile that held no warmth. "You want my blessing," he stated, as though it were the simplest equation. "Here's the truth, Kyle, my blessings aren't given, they're earned. And I haven't seen much from you that convinces me you're worthy of my granddaughter's hand." He leaned back in his chair, crossing one leg over the other. "You think introductions at a party, a few polite words, a ring, a title, these are enough to secure the Newman name? You misunderstand what this family represents. There's a legacy here. A responsibility. A price. And marriage is not some social contract to be signed on a whim." Claire's heart pounded so loudly she swore everyone in the room could hear it. She swallowed, reached for Kyle's hand under the table, and gave it a reassuring squeeze. He returned her pressure, a silent signal that he would not falter. Nikki cleared her throat, leaning forward. "Victor, please." Kyle and Claire have proven themselves to be good partners. Claire has your daughters back in the company, and Kyle's support for her has never wavered. Shouldn't that count for something? Victor's gaze flicked to Nikki, then back to Kyle. You think because she works at Newman Enterprises that qualifies her for marriage into this family? If anyone works for me, it's because they earn it. Not because of who their mother is. He paused, his patience thinning. Maybe I'm skeptical because I've seen plenty of young couples rush into marriage, only to find themselves growing hateful of one another when real life sets in. What makes you think you're any different, Kyle? For a moment, Kyle considered listing the qualities that made Claire special: her integrity, her loyalty, that fierce spark in her eyes when she spoke of her dreams. He wanted to defend her with his words as if armor, but instead he spoke from the heart. Because she's Claire Newman, he said quietly. And I would cross 1,000 oceans, take on 1,000 battles, just to prove that to you, Mr. Newman. Victor's eyes narrowed, studying Kyle as though looking for cracks in his resolve. Then he leaned forward. All right, Kyle. You want to prove it? Show me. Show me you belong. He gestured to the maitre d' at the far end of the room. Prepare my drink, a single glass of aged Macallan, no ice. In 20 minutes, I want you to bring it to me. If that scotch is not exactly 30 years old, exactly what I've requested, then you've wasted my time and Claire's. Kyle's pulse quickened. He knew exactly what was at stake. Victor's scrutinizing I would not tolerate imperfection. A single misstep could shatter Claire's dreams. Yet Kyle straightened in his chair and met Victor's gaze with unwavering conviction. Yes, sir, he said, nodding. As he rose to retrieve the scotch, Claire followed, concern etched across her face. Kyle, are you sure? He offered her a small, reassuring smile. I can do this. Walking through the guests toward the private bar at the edge of the room, Kyle's mind raced. He had to find that exact bottle, no less than 30-year-old, cask strength, single malt. And he needed to carry it back in immaculate condition. He scanned the glass case behind the bartender, noting dozens of premium bottles, some labeled rare scotch, others private collection. Behind it all, nestled in a satin-lined cubby, was the one he sought, Newman Reserve, aged 30 years. His pulse surged in his throat, his lips curling into a quiet smile of triumph. He stepped forward. But as he reached out to open the glass panel, he glimpsed Claire standing at the doorway, her face pale, her eyes glistening with tears. Something in her expression made him pause. The distance between them felt like a chasm. She glanced down at her hands, clenched, trembling. He realized in that moment that the greatest trial was not fetching a bottle of scotch, it was all that this task symbolized. The unspoken question lingered between them: if he succeeded, would Victor finally accept them, or would the price simply become higher? If he failed, what future would that leave Claire? He selected the bottle carefully, cradling it as though it were a newborn child. The label bore Victor's initials in gold foil, V. Newman, Distillery Edition. And he felt the weight of that legacy, as though it were a gauntlet thrown at his feet. The bartender, hired for the occasion, slid the bottle into a velvet-lined box, sealing it with a small Newman insignia. Kyle felt the tension mounting. Would the box's seal hold? Would Victor pick up on the slightest hint of imperfection? Returning to the drawing room, the guests parted like seas, allowing Kyle to pass. Every step felt like an eternity. Finally, he reached Victor's side, who sat erect, back immovable against the high-backed leather chair. Victor raised one eyebrow, his gaze cutting like a blade. Kyle knelt before him, carefully opening the velvet box to reveal the gleaming crystal decanter within. The amber liquid inside caught the light like honey spun from gold. Victor lifted the decanter, tracing the label with a single index finger. He inhaled, a gesture of ritual in which Kyle felt his own breath catch in his lungs. Then Victor poured a small measure into a crystal tumbler, swirled the liquid once, and let it settle. He raised the glass to his nose, eyes closed, as though conjuring memories of every sip he had ever savored. The seconds stretched like hours. Finally, he tasted it. His eyes snapped open, pinning Kyle to the spot. A slow, almost imperceptible nod. Kyle exhaled. Against all odds, he had met Victor's demand. Victor replaced the glass upon the table and leaned back. "Impressive," he said, voice flat, betraying nothing but respect. "Not many people know how to procure a bottle of Newman Reserve, let alone deliver it without a single scratch. You passed my test, Kyle. For that, I give you my acknowledgement." Claire, teary-eyed, stepped forward and slipped her hand into Kyle's. The two of them rose together, standing before Victor's gaze. His eyes flicked from Kyle to Claire, as though registering the bond that connected them. For the first time that night, he nodded with something like approval. "Remember this moment," he said gravely. "You earned it." And with that single pronouncement, Kyle and Claire felt as though a weight had lifted. Kyle released a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Claire, head held high, dared to hope that perhaps this moment would mark a new chapter, one in which her love for Kyle could flourish under Victor's cautious blessing. But as they retreated to the corner of the room, away from prying eyes, Kyle wrapped his arms around Claire and whispered, "We did it." Claire laid her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, a reassurance stronger than any Scotch could offer. For though Victor's nod had opened a door, they both knew that maintaining acceptance within the Newman dynasty would require a lifetime of such tests. The future remained uncertain, but for tonight, Kyle Abbott had proven himself in the eyes of Victor Newman. Yet neither of them could know what trials lay ahead, boardroom battles, power struggles within the family, or perhaps a challenge even more personal when the truth about next year's events surfaced. Inside the grand drawing room, the party resumed its polite facade, smiles restored, hushed gossip bubbling anew. But in the hushed corners where loyalties were forged and broken, a whispered rumor was already taking shape. Kyle Abbott had finally earned a seat at Victor's table. And Clare Newman, eyes shining with cautious joy, dared to dream that they might carve out a life for themselves under the formidable shadow of the Newman name. In Genoa City, though, permission could be fleeting. Alliances shifted as quickly as the candle flames flickered across the polished marble. And the most dangerous obstacle of all, Victor Newman's unwavering will, remained a constant wildcard. But for tonight, Kyle and Claire clung to each other, hearts pounding in tandem, ready to face whatever storm the next sunrise would bring. And somewhere deep in their souls, they believed that love, no matter how tested, might yet be the strongest legacy of all. Kyle Abbott stood in the cavernous foyer of the Newman mansion in the waning twilight, the last amber rays of the setting sun glinting off the marble floors. He straightened the lapels of his tailored jacket for the 10th time that evening, his breath catching each time he thought of the storm that awaited him inside. Claire's hand had slipped into his under the threshold of the door, her fingers cold and trembling with both excitement and dread. She had believed, perhaps naively, that tonight, Kyle's final gambit would win her grandfather's approval once and for all. She had watched him practice polite pleasantries for days, braced herself for mundane tests of loyalty, and allowed herself to imagine a future where Victor Newman might someday embrace her and her sweetheart as bona fide heirs of the family name. But as Kyle stepped forward into the great hall, he could sense the walls closing in, could almost taste the skepticism etched into every carved molding and polished banister. Claire's father, Jack Abbott, had warned her that Victor rarely played games but instead expected absolute fealty and perfection, qualities Kyle could muster but only at a cost. For nights he had lain awake, calculating every possible strategy, only to realize that no amount of boardroom brilliance, no heroic feat of business acumen, would ever truly soften Victor's heart. And yet he persisted, because Claire's happiness demanded it. Inside the living room, Nikki Newman stood at the center of a small group of guests, family acquaintances, business associates, and the Newman household staff, whose murmurs rippled through the air like the rustle of dry leaves in autumn. Nikki's face was pale, flushed with anxiety, as she fussed with a serving tray of hors d'oeuvres, picking at a mini quiche that had gone cold in her hand. Her eyes flicked to the doorway every few seconds, waiting for her granddaughter and Kyle to appear. Somewhere inside her heart lingered hope that this evening could restore a measure of peace to the fractured clan, but experience cautioned her otherwise. She knew Victor's every mood swing, every flicker of impatience. She had watched him dismantle rival empires with a single phone call, yet had never seen him fully yield to the soft pleadings of love or goodwill. To her left, Victoria Newman, Claire's mother, whispered behind gloved fingers to Nikki's brother, revealing equal parts sympathy for Claire and unspoken frustration at Victor's unyielding rigidity. Yet despite her misgivings, Victoria refused to betray the faintest trace of her true sentiments. She smiled at guests, her laughter even-pitched, but the carefully cultivated facade of loyalty weighed on her. Victoria and Nikki both wanted to push Victor to accept their daughter's chosen partner. After all, Kyle had proven himself a man of integrity. But with each tick of the grandfather clock in the hallway, Nikki's heart pounded faster. What if Kyle's final card flopped disastrously? What if Victor's patience snapped once more and Claire's dreams lay shattered on the marble floor? From the gleaming parquet floors to the ornate oil portraits that lined the walls, the mansion exuded an opulent grandeur that Kyle had once found intoxicating. But tonight, it smelled of old power and stale expectations, the air heavy with unspoken judgments. He had come prepared to demonstrate his worth in one last, dramatic way. For weeks, he had monitored the comings and goings of the Newman shipping containers at the family docks, had discreetly secured documentation proving that a smaller subsidiary under Victor's control had illegally leveraged company funds to undercut competing firms. He had obtained, through careful research and subtle persuasion, the whistleblower's testimony, someone who had worked for Victor in the shipping division, fearful enough to trade his anonymity for safe harbor. Kyle believed that if he presented father and grandfather, Victor Newman, with irrefutable evidence that the patriarch had once knowingly endangered the lives of dock workers by bypassing safety protocols, it would force Victor to look beyond the veneer of family honor and acknowledge Kyle's tenacity, courage, and unwavering moral compass. Once Victor realized that Kyle would not flinch in exposing wrongdoing, even if it meant tarnishing the Newman name. Surely he would regard Kyle as someone worthy of Claire's hand, someone who would stand by her through both sunshine and storm. It was a high-stakes maneuver, perhaps even reckless, but Kyle's mind had been settled. The future of his relationship with Claire demanded it. He had arranged for the whistleblower to wait in a discreet side parlor off the main drawing room. If Victor confronted him about the allegations, Kyle would spring forth with the evidence. A digital dossier on a tablet, all files encrypted and timestamped, accompanied by the man's sworn affidavit, and present not only the proof of Victor's corporate indiscretions but also Kyle's sincerity in fighting for justice, no matter the cost. That was the plan, the final tactic in a long campaign to win Victor's trust. But even as he approached the swinging French doors, which opened onto the room where Victor sat, Kyle could feel the pit of dread in his stomach widen. Was he trading one kind of rejection, Claire's anger or disappointment, for another far worse? Could his attempt to rescue the warehouse workers backfire and align him permanently with those who sought to harm the Newman empire? He steeled his resolve, reminding himself that he would rather fail in honorable defeat than surrender to Victor's constant tests of loyalty. Claire accompanied him across the threshold, wearing a gown of midnight blue that mirrored her quiet determination and the ceaseless flutter of anxiety in her eyes. When Victor rose from his leather armchair, his posture rigid, his eyes cool and assessing, Claire felt her pulse shudder through her throat. Victor made no move to greet his granddaughter. Instead, he surveyed the pair as though they were insects crawling on his polished floors, temporary intruders in his realm. Kyle bowed his head respectfully, but Claire's heart sank as Victor moved not an inch closer. Nikki stood just behind them, her expression strained. This was it, the moment of reckoning. Kyle, Victor said, voice steady but cold as marble, I understand you have something to say. There was neither a handshake offered nor any flash of warmth in his gaze. Just the unwavering glare of a man who neither forgave easily nor forgot. Kyle swallowed, then straightened, stepping forward with measured determination. Grandfather, Mr. Newman, I appreciate this chance. For months now, Claire's happiness and I've tried to honor your expectations, but I know I've fallen short of something you deem essential. So tonight, I have come to you with a choice. He reached into the breast pocket of his jacket, producing a tablet that gleamed with backlit promise. This contains the testimony of a long-trusted employee from your shipping division. He witnessed how profits were prioritized over safety at one of your docks, discovered corners cut to save a few $1,000s that cost a life, and instead of rectifying the situation, he saw the incident swept under the rug. Victor's jaw clenched, the Kruger painting behind him momentarily quivered in the dim lamplight as the silence thickened. Nikki gasped, Victoria's breath caught in her throat, and Claire's face went pale. The room felt like it might collapse under the weight of the accusation. None dared speak. Victor's eyes blazed like twin furnaces. Time hung suspended as Kyle forwarded the whistleblower's affidavit and accompanied it with video footage showing frayed ropes, unsteady cranes, and charts compiled by the victims' union that corroborated the employee's testimony.